Hi guys, I'm outside today. The weather is very lovely and I hope that the sound on this video is not terrible. But I'm back again today, this time to talk about the myth of the middle class writer. I am actually excited about this one. As you know, I almost read it in my last video. And I'm drinking jade oolong from Adagio tea. What are you guys drinking? I'm very curious about your favorite teas because I stick pretty much just to Tazo and Adagio teas other than like herbal teas from other places. And I really like Adagio teas, but if there's somewhere else better out there for a loose leaf good tea that's not terribly expensive, I want to know about it. I've done a couple hours of work so far. So this is my little break to film with you guys, to read Lit Hub, to have our little literary reaction time, our discussion. Hope you all have your beverages. I, again, am not crocheting today. Okay, this is called Cutting Class on the Myth of the Middle Class Writer by Alyssa Court. Like a quarter of a gallon. Okay. The following is the first of a 6-part collaboration with Dirt. Capitalized. Who's Dirt? Oh, digital something about page. Dirt. Okay, anyway, maybe it doesn't actually stand for something, but it's a magazine that covers books, streaming, fashion, blockchain, music, and the internet. Interesting. I wonder if I should follow them. Anyway, okay. So this is the first of a 6-part collaboration with Dirt about the myth of the middle class writer. Check back here throughout the week for more on the increasingly difficult prospect of making a living as a full-time writer. Or subscribe to Dirt to get the series in your inbox. Am I gonna subscribe to Dirt? I don't think so. Okay. Daryl Lorenzo Wellington was for 2 years the 6th Poet Laureate of Santa Fe. He also sold his plasma to get by. Have you guys ever sold plasma? I have not. I know somebody who did it during COVID. My plasma is probably not acceptable given the meds that I'm on. But I heard that it wasn't super pleasant because you can't move either arm. I don't know. Or you have needles in both arms. I don't know. Okay. I first met Wellington through the organization I co-founded, Economic Hardship Reporting Project, when I edited an essay about how he sold his blood so he could continue to be a writer. Technically, he didn't sell his blood if he sold his plasma. He just sold something, a part of his blood. I'm nitpicking. In his last volume, Wellington describes his writing in much the same way he talks about the place he lives, full of riddles, tiny, insidious lights, mysterious UFOs, and mirages that beckon me. One of the mirages that resides in many books today, of course, for him and for many of us, is the idea of its author being a middle-class writer. That appellation seems somewhat fantastical. Did I say appellation right? Let me look that up.
Appellation.
Appellation. Like, almost like the Appalachian Mountains. Okay. That appellation seems somewhat fantastical, something born of secret inheritances and side hustles. Becoming one has become the literary version of the illusory American dream. It rhymes with the do-what-you-love exhortation that was directed at my generation, those younger, a rallying cry for those born in the later 1970s and 80s, an ideology that mixed techno-hyper-individualism and hippie pleasure-seeking. Its proponents were up on the problems of workplace alienation and exploitation, but rather than prescribing social change, they merely proposed you get a cooler job. Isn't that still happening today? Like, I would say that's the same thing. Like, we're still proposing people get cooler jobs. Oh, you don't like your job? You don't make enough money? Just get a different one. As if they're all over the place jobs that pay you lots of money. But honestly, I I would like to be a middle class writer, but it's true that's not like feasible. You gotta be famous, famous. Unfortunate, isn't it? It would be nice to just be able to write. I wonder how much you'd have to sell books for. How much would you have to sell books for? How much would I have to sell poems for since I don't write books? That reminds me of something that I saw about how you get paid the same, pretty much the same now for publishing a short story in a magazine or something as Louisa May Alcott did, which is extremely unfortunate. You'd think that that would go up with inflation, but no, writing is not valued. It's valued intellectually. It might be valued morally or spiritually. Um, in the mental space, it's valued, but it is not valued in the financial space. Maybe because it doesn't lead to more growth. It's like individual growth, personal growth. I don't know. Okay. The mandate to make a living pursuing one's deepest aspirations drove scores of young people into the MFA programs and journalism schools that trained writers. They proliferated from 79 creative writing programs in 1975 to the recent number of 602 undergrad and 247 postgrad programs. This was fine until graduates wound up in debt. These degree programs cost so much and then graduated into a brutal job market and a climate of stagnating wages at publications owned by billionaires and private equity firms. It turned out that laborers of love also got caught in the maw of capitalism. They've linked the price of the degree program. This is from 2122. First and second year MFA programs. For 1 year, the tuition was 66,000, almost 67,000. And then with all the other fees, the total was over 73,000. And that's at Columbia. Okay, well, that's Columbia, though. Not that all writers wouldn't like to go to an Ivy League MFA program. Certainly. Okay. Conditions for writers and other creatives were already shaky, their personal finances in many cases unsustainable before the COVID-19 pandemic. The way that Wellington, 59, sees it, the pandemic made the borderline impossible truly impossible. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that there was a change in writing before COVID-19. Now, I know obviously other creatives, like there was the writer's strike. Oh, maybe that's what they're talking about. I was thinking, so she may be talking about writing generally, not just write it on paper and sell it. Nevertheless, he says, I still do it. Doing it entails a recent essay anthology he has put together, including a piece on the economic perils of being a writer. Great. While he is widely published, Wellington has never earned enough to have a savings account. Oh my goodness. Even when he was the poet laureate and was often invited to speak, he made just $30,000 a year, a combination of the $10,000 honorarium from the city and speaking fees. In his home, Santa Fe, the median rent for a one-bedroom apartment was $1,996 in 2024, up 15% from the previous year. So yeah, you can't live on that. But according to a 2022 Authors Guild survey of 5,699 published authors, Wellington was actually doing well financially compared to the median American author. The median gross pre-tax income of full-time established authors was $25,000 per year, only $10,000 of which was from book-related sources. Huh. Book-related sources. In contrast, in 1989, the median author income was $23,000, not adjusted for inflation. Not adjusted for inflation. So that means really authors are making less now, probably. Of the Author Guild's respondents, 56% said they made extra income from events, ghostwriting, teaching, and yes, journalism. At the same time, the rental market has climbed to new heights. People hate how AI is going to destroy writers and artists, Wellington says, but rent increases are far more likely to. Yeah, I would imagine that's true. You'd think there would be a point in the writer's life when you wouldn't have to work another job to support yourself, right? But that has become the norm. If you're going to write, everybody says, oh, this is how you find time to write. You need to learn to write around your other responsibilities. It's not like it's not like YouTube, for instance, where if you have enough subscribers, if you have enough affiliate links or sponsorships, then at a certain point you can quit your full-time job. Writing isn't like that. And is it really because there's less of a market for it? Because I don't think there is. Well, I guess maybe there is more of a market for video content than for written content, but still, you'd think if a city is going to have a poet laureate, you would think they would pay them to do that full time. You want them to be the best. You want them to have time to do that. There's no impetus to become a poet laureate, right? Other than personal ambition. When I was growing up in the 1980s, I'd turn over my vintage contemporary edition of the latest Raymond Carver collection and stare at his author photo, black and white, leather jacket clad. Within its pages, I found writing of a cool, melancholic precision describing failed American dreamers drifting through life. I loved that he was working class. Perhaps writers didn't have to come from privilege, I realized. There's somebody going by, I have to feed Bingley treats. Bingley, can I offer you a treat? They're just humans. Yes, good boy. That is one thing about sitting outside. There's more for Bingley to bark at out here. But it's also really good for him because he's far enough away from them that they're not a threat, so I can reinforce the positivity associated with these triggers that he has. Anyway, back to this. Okay. Perhaps writers didn't have to come from privilege, I realized, although troublingly, as I paid more attention, I saw that those poorer writers seemed to always be white. As the child of parents who taught at CUNY, am I dumb? I feel like, oh, City University of New York. Yes, I am dumb. Um, my mother's parents, immigrants who owned a small shoe store in the Bronx. This was the kind of mobility I needed to believe in, this different version of American opportunity. The story went like this. If a person read and was original enough, people would talk to her. Then they might publish her, and then she could even earn enough for her rent. She was, unfortunately, usually white for this equation to work. And this belief wasn't just cultural brainwashing. The post-war creative program system can be read as an institutional reaction to the decline in the market viability of writing. Academia was absorbing people who couldn't get jobs, or it was expanding who could think of themselves as a trained writer. That's interesting because now it's so hard to get into English academia because there aren't jobs or, you can't get tenure. Still doesn't pay that much, stuff like that. As Martin McGurl, author of the key study of this, the program era post-war fiction and the rise of creative writing, and a Stanford literature professor put it to me, Carver and lots of writers found their way to writing classes in the post-war period where they wrote about working, where that was the subject matter of literature. But that moment is gone. Today, there are a small number of fiction writers and poets who write explicitly about the experience of backbreaking or humiliating underpaid day jobs and the financial struggle that comes with them. Sometimes it's nonfiction essayists like Wellington or Brendan Joyce, who has written a poetry collection called Unemployment Insurance and has worked as a busboy. It's also poets from working class backgrounds who have written about their own housing insecurity or about labor organizing, like Jen Fitzgerald, author of Art of Work, and the poet Rodrigo Toscano. They both appear in our new anthology, Going for Broke. Other recent examples are novelists and novels like Raven Leilani's Luster or Kylie Reid's Such a Fun Age. Yeah, I've never written about my work. It simply didn't occur to me. It is true that mine is not a manual job, and maybe that's part of it. It may be easier to write about a manual job than to write about an editing job or like a editing adjacent sort of job. Um, but still, I don't write about the day to day, you know, the struggle of getting up in the morning and sitting down to work. I don't write about the not relief, but like the ah at the end of the day where you're all done and you can lay on the floor or take your dog for a walk or something like that. Food for thought, certainly. Food for writing. That is perhaps subject matter I should explore. Maybe we should all write a poem on work. Annie McClanahan, author of the book Dead Pledges, Debt, Crisis, and 21st Century Culture, about how the epidemic of American debt interlaces with popular culture, notes that Reed and Leilani are doing the most interesting stuff right now with class, money, and service work, and both have said that they are writing on the basis of their own experience as a gig worker and as a nanny babysitter, respectively. Sometimes these books about social class reflect the writer's early life penury, as in Andre Dubus III's recent novel, Such Kindness. Does the epidemic of American debt interlace with popular culture? I mean, with like TikTok shop, YouTube shopping. Does Instagram Shop still exist? I never used it, but I know it did at one point. That would make sense. I guess there is a lot there, writing about finances, writing about work, writing about debt, writing about spending. There probably is a lot of content there that I just haven't ever thought about. All of these writers are examples, of course, that despite the wrong-headed and corrosive underpinnings of the do what you love ideology, writing burk, burk, writing books is great work if you can get it. Unfortunately, fewer and fewer get the chance to translate the mindset into a reality. Instead, they marinate in an atmosphere of cruel optimism, as the scholar Lauren Berlant wrote in her book of the same name, an ambiance that exists when something you desire is actually an obstacle to your flourishing. Professional possibilities have become more limited, wrote Berlant, including upward mobility, job security, political and social equality, and lively, durable intimacy. What today's writers experience when they do what they love could be likened to Berlant's stupid optimism. Yeah. I've always thought, not maybe not always, but for a long time I have thought that it would be really nice to do a literary salon at my house, right? Like in um what's it called? The Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, where you get together and also, of previous ages, where women who were not really involved in the public literature would get together and discuss and educate themselves on literature with one another. They'd bring their favorite thing and they'd share it, right? I've always thought that that would be really nice to do. Um, and I probably should start doing that. But I think that the lack of things like that, the lack of continuing to educate ourselves on literature, even when that's not easily accessible to us, or educating ourselves on, it doesn't have to be like academic literature. It could be just the written word in some sense, in a magazine article, things like that. I think the lack of that is is impacting our culture. The fact that we don't look for that. Now, I wouldn't say that like song lyrics can't be literature, but they typically are not as incisive as the plain written word can be. I'm not going to generalize, but I find that generally to be the case. It must be said, though, that the advice, do what you love, was and is usually meant kindly, as a way to correct the old ideas about labor as something that is dutiful or mechanical or lifeless. And doing what you love was more achievable in previous eras, at least for some slices of the population, when writing was a job and compensated accordingly. Today, however, writers are often encouraged to work for exposure or to think of low pay and lack of job security as a supposedly fair exchange for not being bored out of our skulls. Yet another hat trick of neoliberalism, where the more work provides actual meaning in people's lives, the more it's denigrated as a hobby or vanity project, which makes it easier to keep labor costs down across the board. Nevertheless, there are those who keep writing without the support of institutions or intergenerational wealth. There are those of us who keep trying to build up said institutions so they can do so, so it's not only the rich writing about the poor to be consumed by the middle class. Another person. Bingley! Good boy. To pay his rent, for example, Darrell Lorenzo Wellington has received small grants from media nonprofits like ours in the community change. He has taught elementary school, given speeches about writing and race. Currently, he's even paid to perform the role of the novelist Richard Wright, the author of the novel Native Son, on stage. They call that creative entrepreneurship, Wellington says, emphasizing the phrase's absurdity. Yet for him, remaining a writer has always been crucial. I wanted to do my thing, do something unique, and he has. I don't know, guys, kind of a depressing article, but not surprising for those of us who are in a writing space. Like, I know that I'm not going to be a full-time writer. I guess I'll be happy if I publish a poetry book and people buy it. A couple people buy it. Um, it is unfortunate, of course, but that's the state of the world. I mean, what can you do about it? You have ideas? Because I don't think there is anything to do about it. Not right now, at least. Okay. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.